I stand before you today because the truth can no longer be ignored. We have rebuilt this vision from the ground up, and we will not falter. This is not just about power, this is about our future. Future that belongs to every single one of us.
Welcome back to the Withheld Files. Thank you for spending this time with us. If you love stories about hidden truths, secret inheritances, and family members who show up only when there's money involved, tap that like button before we begin. And if you're new here, subscribe. We drop a new hidden file every week. Today's question: if a stranger showed up tomorrow with paperwork proving they were your sibling, would you open your heart or your lawyer's phone number first? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's open this file. Renata Calloway had built an empire on one rule: never let anyone see you flinch. But the day a stranger walked into her company's biggest press conference and called her sister in front of 40 cameras, she felt her hands go cold for the first time in 20 years. He was holding a folder. Inside that folder was a document with her dead father's signature on it, a signature that, if real, meant half of everything she had built since she was 23 years old had never fully belonged to her. Ray had spent her whole life being told her father left them with nothing. Now a man she had never met was standing in front of her board, her investors, and her legacy, claiming her father had left behind far more than nothing, and that half of it had his name on it too. The cameras were still rolling, and Ray had exactly 30 seconds to decide whether to smile or to fight. If you're new here, welcome to the Withheld Files. Hit that like button if you're already invested in finding out the truth, and subscribe now so you don't miss where this story goes. Let's get into it. Renata Calloway did not remember her father's face without trying. She remembered his hands. Rough, cracked at the knuckles, always smelling faintly of engine grease because he worked nights at an auto shop on the south side of Atlanta before he disappeared from her life the week she turned 7. Her mother, Loretta, never spoke his name after that, not once. Not at Christmas, not at graduations, not even in the hospital room the night she died, holding Ray's hand and telling her the only inheritance that mattered was the one nobody could take from her: her mind, her will, and her name. Ray built Calloway Holdings out of a single rundown duplex she bought at 23 with a loan she almost didn't qualify for. 24 years later, it was one of the largest privately held real estate and hospitality firms in the Southeast, with luxury properties from Charleston to Nashville and a headquarters tower in downtown Atlanta with her family name etched across the lobby in brushed gold letters. She had done it without a husband's money, without family money, without anyone's help but her own relentless discipline. That story was the one the press loved to tell, and it was true. It just wasn't the whole truth. Ray didn't know that yet. The morning everything changed, she was standing at a podium in the atrium of the Excelsior, a century-old hotel she had spent 3 years and $40 million acquiring and restoring in her mother's honor. It was supposed to be the proudest day of her career. That was when a man in a gray suit stepped past security, holding a manila folder against his chest like it was something fragile. "Renata Calloway," he said, loud enough for the cameras to catch every word. "My name is Desmond Marsh. I believe we're family. I believe our father left something for both of us, and I don't think you know it exists." The room went hollow, the way a room goes when everyone realizes they are about to witness something they were never supposed to see. Security escorted him out, but not before he turned back one last time. "I'm not here to embarrass you, Ms. Calloway. I'm here because half of what you built started with his money. And I think it's time both of us knew the truth about where it came from." Ray smiled, cut the ribbon exactly on schedule, and walked off the stage with her spine straight, the way her mother taught her to walk through every storm life ever handed her. It wasn't until she reached her car that her hands finally began to shake. By the time she reached her office, her general counsel, Denise Okoye, was waiting with 3 lawyers and a laptop open to a news clip already past 200,000 views. "He's not lying about having documents," Denise said carefully. "A filing was made this morning in Fulton County. Ray, did you know your father had money?" Ray looked at her the way she looked at anyone who asked a question with an obvious answer. "My father died broke in a shelter in Macon 15 years ago. That's what I was told." That's what I've always believed. That night, alone in her penthouse, Ray read her father's name without flinching for the first time in decades. The document was real, a properly executed trust, dated 11 years before her father's death, naming any legitimate biological heir of Thomas Julian Calloway, also known as Julian Marsh, as an equal beneficiary to a private account that had quietly funded a shell company since the year Ray opened her very first duplex. The account number matched a wire transfer on her earliest bank statements, one she'd always assumed came from an investor group her college mentor connected her with. She had built her legacy believing every brick was laid by her own two hands. Now there was a real possibility the foundation itself had her father's fingerprints on it, and a stranger's name attached to half. If you were building something for 20 years and found out the ground beneath it wasn't fully yours, would you still call it yours? Ray asked herself that question until sunrise. If you've ever built something with your own two hands only to find out the truth was more complicated than you knew, drop a comment below. And if you're enjoying this story, hit like and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what Ray uncovers next. The boardroom that morning felt colder than usual. Victor Sinclair, the board's longest-serving chairman, sat with his fingers steepled and an expression that looked almost pleased. "This is a serious liability," he said, tapping a printed article. "I think, for the health of this company, we need to consider a temporary restructuring of leadership while this is resolved." Ray looked at him for a long moment. "You mean you want my seat?" she said flatly. Victor smiled without denying it. Ray wasn't going to let a stranger with a folder, or a board member with old resentment, take apart everything she built without a fight. But fighting meant going back to a place she'd spent her whole adult life avoiding, the truth about her father. Denise's investigator, a quiet retired detective named Harold Boone, took 11 days to build the first real picture of who Thomas Calloway had become. He hadn't died broke in a shelter. He left Atlanta the year Ray turned 7, changed his legal name to Julian Marsh through a court filing in Savannah, and rebuilt his life 200 miles away. He worked construction for a decade, then began investing in undervalued coastal property when no one else would take the risk. By the time Ray was opening her first duplex, Julian Marsh had quietly become a modestly wealthy man, comfortable enough to anonymously wire $40,000 into a business account belonging to a daughter he never once called on her birthday. Ray read that line 3 times before she understood what it meant. Her father hadn't just abandoned her and started over. He had watched her from a distance her entire adult life, funding her dream without ever once showing his face. It felt like a betrayal wrapped in silence. Harold's report had one more line that changed everything. Julian Marsh had started a new family. A daughter born 9 years after he left Atlanta. Her name was Harlow Marsh, 38. A pediatric nurse outside Savannah, with no record connecting her to Desmond at all. If you were staring down a man who had walked into your life claiming blood you couldn't confirm, what would you do next? Let us know in the comments, and if this story has you hooked, now's a good time to like this video and subscribe. Things are about to get a lot more complicated for Ray. Ray drove to Savannah alone, and sat in her car outside a modest brick house for almost 20 minutes before she found the courage to knock. The woman who opened the door had her father's eyes exactly. "My name is Renata Calloway," Ray finally said. "I think our father is the same man." Harlow's face went through disbelief, confusion, and something close to grief. She invited Ray inside without another word. They sat at Harlow's kitchen table for almost 3 hours. Harlow had grown up knowing her father as Julian Marsh, a quiet man who coached her softball team and never once mentioned another daughter. When Ray mentioned Desmond's name, Harlow hesitated. "I don't think I know him," she said slowly. "But there was a photograph, in my father's things. A young man, maybe 16, standing next to him at a job site. My dad never told me who he was." Ray felt the floor tilt beneath her. If Harlow had a photo, however unclear, then maybe Desmond wasn't lying after all. Maybe there really had been a son her father kept even more hidden than the daughter he raised. That single photograph changed everything Ray thought she understood. Back in Atlanta, she and Denise pored over an enlarged scan of it for hours. The resemblance was there, faint but real, enough that even Denise's most skeptical attorney admitted it wasn't nothing. For 2 full days, Ray let herself believe she might actually have a brother, one her father had loved enough to keep a photograph of for 30 years. She began drafting, against Denise's advice, a private settlement offer, something to avoid dragging Harlow and the company through a public trial over a truth that might, after all, be real. Before she signed anything, Ray did something she never expected herself capable of. She agreed to meet Desmond, alone, at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from her office, away from lawyers and cameras. He arrived without the manila folder this time, dressed simply, and for the first hour, he didn't ask her for anything. He talked about growing up without a father's name to call his own, about finding out only a few years ago who Julian Marsh really was, about spending his savings chasing down a truth he said he only wanted acknowledged. He cried once, briefly, when he mentioned the photograph. "I don't want your company, Renata," he said quietly. "I just wanted to know I wasn't invented out of nothing." Ray sat across from him and felt something she hadn't let herself feel in weeks. The possibility that grief, not greed, was driving him. She left that cafe rattled in a way the courtroom never managed to rattle her, already rehearsing how she'd introduce him to Harlow. It was Harold who stopped her the night before she was set to sign it. He'd spent those same 2 days quietly running the photograph itself, not the resemblance, but the print, the paper stock, the studio watermark barely visible in the corner. The photo wasn't 30 years old. It had been printed on modern photo paper, aged artificially with a common online technique, and the job site in the background matched a construction stock image, still searchable by reverse image lookup. Desmond hadn't found a real photo in Julian Marsh's things. He had planted one, likely slipped into a box of Harlow's father's belongings during a brief visit to her home weeks earlier, posing as an insurance adjuster investigating an old workplace claim. Harlow confirmed, once asked, that a man matching Desmond's description had in fact come by her house nearly 2 months before Desmond's press conference performance, asking questions about her father's old job records. Ray sat with that for a long time. She had almost signed away leverage and nearly welcomed a stranger into her family on the strength of a single manufactured photograph and one convincing conversation over coffee. If Desmond was capable of that, what else had he planted along the way? She asked Harold to quietly investigate Desmond's actual background, no longer assuming anything. What Harold found within 4 days shattered whatever sympathy she had left. Desmond Marsh had legally changed his name twice in 9 years. Before that, he was Desmond Ruiz, a man with a documented history of filing inheritance claims against wealthy estates in 3 states, 2 dismissed for insufficient evidence, 1 resulting in a quiet settlement paid by a frightened family. He wasn't a long-lost brother. He was a professional con artist who specialized in exploiting exactly the kind of grief Ray had carried her whole adult life. Harold also traced how Desmond had obtained the DNA sample supporting his court filing, not from Julian Marsh, but cross-referenced from Harlow's extended family line through public genealogy databases, built into a partial match, difficult to disprove, without a direct comparison to Julian Marsh's actual remains. And there was only one person close enough to Callaway Holdings with access to the company's earliest financial records and a motive to hand them to a stranger. Victor Sinclair had sat on Ray's board for 11 years. Harold found a single email, buried in an old server backup, sent from Victor's personal account to an address later linked to one of Desmond's known aliases. Carefully worded, but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. Victor had reached out first. He had handed a con artist the exact blueprint needed to destabilize the one thing standing between him and full control of the company he'd wanted for over a decade. Ray didn't confront him immediately. She let him believe his plan was working, and quietly, methodically, she and Denise built a case so thorough there would be no ambiguity left for anyone to exploit, including herself. If someone spends years perfecting the art of exploiting grief, what happens the day the grief runs out of room to be exploited? Tell us what you think in the comments. If you're still with us, smash that like button and subscribe. We're almost at the truth. The hearing took place on a gray Tuesday morning. Desmond arrived with a legal team dressed sharply enough to suggest confidence he no longer fully possessed. When his attorney presented the partial DNA match, Denise stood and calmly requested the court compel a direct comparison against verified remains belonging to Julian Marsh, along with an affidavit detailing exactly how the sample had been improperly sourced and how the supporting photograph submitted days earlier had been forensically dated to under a year old. The courtroom went silent in a different way than the atrium had gone silent weeks earlier. Harlow testified next, quietly confirming a man matching Desmond's description had visited her home under false pretenses 2 months before his public claim. Then Harold's findings were entered into the record. The 2 prior dismissed claims, the quiet settlement, and the email trail connecting Victor Sinclair to Desmond's earliest outreach. Ray watched Victor's face as that email was read aloud. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man watching 11 years of patient scheming collapse in the span of 90 seconds. The judge dismissed Desmond's petition before lunch, citing insufficient and improperly obtained evidence, and referred the matter to the district attorney's office. Desmond didn't look at anyone on his way out. Whatever confidence carried him through 40 cameras at the Excelsior had entirely burned away. Ray thought about how close she'd come to signing that settlement, and how close she'd come to believing him across a cafe table the whole drive back to her office. The district attorney's office confirmed the case would take months to fully close, and Ray understood, with a discomfort she hadn't expected, that Desmond might not be the last person to try this. The trust's existence was public record now, and there was no way to know who else might come looking. Victor resigned from the board within the week, quietly, without a public statement. The board voted unanimously to reaffirm Ray's leadership, but Ray found she cared less about the board's approval than about the real trust document still sitting on her desk. Proof her father really had loved her in his own broken, distant way, without ever asking for credit. Ray called Harlow 3 days after the hearing, not as a business matter, but simply as 2 women who shared a father neither of them had ever fully understood. They met at a small restaurant outside Savannah, away from cameras, away from lawyers, and for the first time, Ray let herself talk about her father as a man, flawed, absent, ashamed of the mistakes he made, spending the back half of his life trying, in his own imperfect way, to make something right he never had the courage to say out loud. 2 months later, Ray stood in front of the Excelsior again, this time for a much smaller gathering, standing beside a small brass plaque near the hotel's restored lobby fountain. It read simply, "In honor of Loretta Calloway, who gave everything, and Julian Marsh, who gave what he could from a distance he was too afraid to close." Her father hadn't left her an inheritance meant to be fought over in a courtroom. He had left her proof that even the people who fail us the most can still, in their own quiet way, be trying, and proof that the people who claim to be family aren't always the ones who deserve the name. If someone in your own family showed up decades later trying to make amends in the only broken way they knew how, would you be able to see past the years they took from you to find whatever small love they left behind? And if a stranger could almost convince you with nothing but a manufactured photograph and one honest-sounding conversation, how sure are you that you'd have caught it in time? Ray still isn't entirely sure of her own answer to either question. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments what you would have done in Ray's position, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Withheld Files for more hidden stories of family, betrayal, and truth waiting to be uncovered.